G'day folks, Chris Nitso, just waiting for the stream to come online. It's just started to come online. When I've got it, when I'm on to that 100% stream health, we'll get going. Pretty simple stuff really. We've got a little bit of Coral Sea stuff to talk about, and then we'll get stuck into the main event. So coming to you a bit later because it is geared more towards WA folks, because of the obvious reasons. We'll get started. Beautiful. Alrighty. So we'll get to this one shortly. I just want to have a quick chat about some stuff going on over in the Coral Sea first, and then we'll get stuck into the main event. Alright. And I just want to make sure you've got some times there. Beautiful. Yep, perfect. I'm trying to sort out my screens. G'day folks, Chris Nitso, Weather IQ, this lead forecaster. We've got important stuff to talk about tonight regarding the tropical cyclone impact on northwest WA. We've seen some model trends in the last 12 hours or so, which puts that in a little bit further westwards than perhaps the JTWC's forecast track has it going, more around where the Bureau of Meteorology's forecast track has it going. We've also got a weak circulation located in and around Vanuatu over the next couple of days. That's going to move westwards into the central Coral Sea. So we'll have a quick chat about that one. I don't want to spend too much time talking about that one though, because it takes away from the importance of talking about the WA system. So quickly, we'll get stuck into this one, and then we'll talk about the main event. By the way, our major sponsors on the top left there, Fair Income, top left. Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing. All right, top left, Fair Income builds Townsville. So if you're in the market for a shed safe accredited shed, check them out. And they can deliver shed kits Australia-wide too, which is pretty cool if you know how to put them together. And for us, we've got a subscription service. So if you do like what we do and you want to subscribe and support us, we have a Weather IQ subscription service. The subscription starts at $32.95 a year to get all my forecasts. On top of that, you can get some extras, and the main subscription, the one that's the most popular, is this one here, $69.95 a year, and that gets you all of our weather graphics as well. All right. Sorry, got something stuck in my teeth. Right, let's get stuck into this little low in the Coral Sea. All right, so we've got a weak circulation around Vanuatu at the moment, and that weak circulation is going to push westwards over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours. That little circulation is going to get to about the central Coral Sea. It's got a decision to make come Tuesday. If it decides that it wants to get strong, it's going to likely move away to the southeast. We don't think it's going to get too strong, and that makes it more interesting longer term, because if it gets strong, it'll move away. If it stays really weak, there's a chance there that the system just sort of hangs about in the central Coral Sea for a little while. And eventually, we expect conditions to become a little better in the Coral Sea for the system to intensify maybe into next weekend or beyond. All right, so the idea here is quite clearly we have a weak circulation tracking westwards. There's a lot of models that have picked this up. It's not just a few models. All right, so you can see lots of models have picked this up, and they're all pulling it westwards over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 days. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So if the system was to just start to deepen and intensify into a tropical cyclone, it's pretty easy from here. It just will move, it'll just move away to the southeast and head out to the graveyard, all right? But where it gets tricky is if the system stays weak. If the system stays weak, there's not going to be a clear steering mechanism for it. So it's going to be one of those situations where the system's going to potentially just sort of muck around for, 3, 4 days and not do much. It's just going to sit there and sit there and sit there and stew. Eventually what will happen is that the Coral Sea will become more favourable to tropical developments. So if it stays there and doesn't develop till the end of the week, the expectation over the weekend is we see a new ridge building from the south of the state, and that ridge is through a multi-level part of the atmosphere. And so what will happen then is whatever's left of this out here will then come towards the coastline. So that's why a scenario where the system becomes a cyclone is quite uninteresting, because it just pushes down into the South Pacific. A scenario where the system stays weak for a week, I like that, weak for a week, and then decides to intensify. That's a much more interesting scenario. All right, so basically out here, we got a system that just mucks around, and we have huge disagreement about how we deal with it. And a lot of the disagreement comes from how strong does the system become. The stronger it becomes, the more likely it is to push away. The weaker it is, the less we can see it, the better for the system, because it stays in there and continues to muck around. Eventually, it will become strong, but if that eventually happens next weekend, then we can see that there are a few models that pull the system onto the coastline. The overwhelming majority are suggesting that the system will either be strong too early and push away to the southeast, or die out here in the Coral Sea. But what makes it interesting is that the dynamics in the Coral Sea do change as we go between about days 7 to 10, around that 15th, 16th of Feb, because of a trough system that moves up from the south and a trough system that moves down from the north, and a collision of air masses. Tropical air will meet subtropical air somewhere around central Queensland's coastline, between sort of Townsville and Rockhampton. Those air masses are going to clash somewhere in there. Now, what we don't know is the way that those air masses are going to clash. Are they going to clash and spark a cyclone or a low? Are they just going to clash and create convergence? Could they clash here, but also clash here in the Gulf and create a secondary low across northwest Queensland, potentially driving a major flood into Queensland as we go into week 2? There's a lot of ifs, there's a lot of buts, and there's a lot of maybes here. The one thing we do know is that we're going to see a low tracking west from Vanuatu in the next 48 hours, getting into our part of the Coral Sea in the next 48 hours. And then we're watching very, very intently on whether or not that low develops. If that low develops, off it goes to the southeast. See you later. We don't need to discuss it anymore. If it doesn't develop, then we need to keep an eye on it. All right? So that's why it's important that we don't dismiss it and just say, no, it's going out to the graveyard, because we're not sure if it's going to develop. There's a lot of models that don't develop it. And a low that doesn't develop, it sounds counterintuitive, but a low that doesn't develop actually becomes a lot more interesting for Queensland in the long run than a low that does develop and ducks off to the southeast. All right, so that's what we're watching here. It's very messy, it's very convoluted, and that's why I don't want to go into too much detail about it today until we see what this little low is going to do over the next few days. All right, and on top of that, it takes away from the messaging for WA. And the messaging for WA is they need to be prepared for a tropical cyclone, a real one, not a fictitious one, a real tropical cyclone impact. All right, but just understand that there are some things going on in the Coral Sea. There are some things going on in the Queensland tropics, both in the Coral Sea and potentially in the Gulf, that become interesting longer term. But for that to become interesting, this low has to stay uninteresting. If this low becomes very interesting, so if this low starts to intensify, well, it's going to take a lot of moisture and take it out to sea. If it doesn't intensify and it just sits there, there's a chance there it comes back at the coastline in 7 to 10 days' time, and then we've got something a lot more interesting and potentially statewide that we're interested in longer term. Okay? But that's all. We'll talk about that for tonight. I'll try and... we probably won't have time for questions because I'm very late with this tonight with regards to this system. If we do have questions, I'd like to leave them for WA folks, so because I think that's far more important than this thing. But for now, just understand that we do have something in the Coral Sea that is moving westwards over the next couple of days, and we'll be watching it very closely next week to see how it develops. Okay? Let's get over to WA. All right, here in WA, we have Tropical Cyclone 20. It's been labelled as 20 by the JTWC. You can see that's our forecast. That's their forecast track from, what time, 5 p.m? 5 p.m. WA time. So 5 p.m. WA time, you've got a system that comes onto the coastline, but have a look at, we'll go right in here. Have a look at how close the system is to Dampier and Karratha. So this is our primary threat area: Dampier, Karratha, Onslow, and potentially Exmouth, right? And one of the things that makes this cyclone tricky is its trajectory to the coastline. So we've got a situation here where, because of that trajectory to the coastline that you're seeing, that makes it very tricky to figure out exactly what part of the coastline the centre of circulation, the centre of circulation is going to cross initially, okay? What we need to understand is that the destructive wind boundary extends a fair way away from the centre. So the cyclone centre could still be 50 to 100 k's north of Dampier, and Dampier can still see the edge of the destructive core. And that's something I've been talking to subscribers about for the last 24 hours, to make sure that they're not too focused just on where the centre's going. It's really important that they understand that the destructive winds from the centre do extend, and they extend a fair way out from the centre of the circulation. So if we're just focused on the centre and going, oh, the centre's 60 k's away, nothing to worry about. There is something to worry about, because the destructive core winds extend more than 60 kilometres away from the centre of the centre. And so that's why it's very important that whenever we're talking cyclones, we understand that that destructive wind field extends a fair way, depending on the cyclone, extends a fair way away from this. And this cyclone looks to be one of those ones where the destructive wind field is quite large. The gale radius is actually quite small, but the destructive wind field becomes quite large. And I'll show you some modelling about that very shortly. So that's the JTWC's crossing point at 2 a.m. on the 7th, no, 8th. Yeah, 8th. 8th at 2 a.m. What's that? Sunday morning, 2 a.m. All right, so that's the crossing point, probably just west of Dampier, west of Karratha. All right, so that's where they expect the system to hit the coast. But once again, huge error margin to the west, fair error margin to the east as well. Okay, so understand that there's variations, and what makes it tricky is that trajectory. Let's have a look at the Bureau of Meteorology's track. That should be getting updated if it hasn't been updated already, but that should be getting updated sometime soon. We'll get into Dampier. There it is. All right. The Bureau of Meteorology's latest track forecast shows the system. By the way, Category 3 is the maximum intensity on the JTWC. Bureau of Meteorology is still maxing out at Category 2 there by the looks of that. The system's putting itself together very, very nicely at the moment, and probably going to be a cyclone at some stage in the morning tomorrow. The idea here is the JTWC, by the way, have different standards compared to the Bureau of Meteorology for what makes a tropical cyclone. So with the Bureau, they need to see the gales wrapping more than halfway around the circulation and to have existed for more than 6 hours. With the JTWC, they only need to see gales in one quadrant around the circulation. So that's obviously met the JTWC standards, hasn't met the Bureau standards just yet. All right, so we can see here the system basically passing, going along the lines of exactly what the Bureau are expecting. Now, what we can see when we zoom into Karratha is that there is still an error margin just west of Point Sampson. So there's an error margin here just west of Point Sampson, and then we get a situation there where the error margin extends all the way, and once again, have a look at the trajectory of the crossing. So see the trajectory? This is what makes life extremely difficult when we're trying to forecast the exact crossing point. Okay, the trajectory of the crossing is basically almost parallel to the coastline until the last 50 kilometres or so, where it starts to move into the coastline. That's the tricky part, that little curvature in. And you can see the error margin extends out past the Northwest Cape. So there's a chance there that the system doesn't even hit the coast here, comes around the Northwest Cape and then hits the coast as far south as Carnarvon. So there's a huge error margin there that it can be sort of masked by what you see on the screen. All right, so that error margin is huge. And when we have a look at the Google Weather Lab, we can see here, this is a huge, huge area of error. So we started around Point Sampson for the furthest eastern solution. and we go all the way. You can hardly see the names of anything here. That's how thick some of this modelling is around the Northwest Cape and that area between Onslow and the Northwest Cape. So our current modelling is suggesting that the system is going to move between Onslow and the Northwest Cape, making landfall in this area, likely as a Category 2 or Category 3. That's the general model consensus. There's still a lot of models that keep the system further westwards, though, that keep it way out further to the west and don't even hit the coast on their way in, and then come down and around and curve around and hit the area between sort of Denham and Carnarvon, or Denham and Coral Bay. So that's certainly something interesting on the other side of the spectrum, western side. With regards to Karratha, the problem that we're going to face with Karratha is probably residents taking this a little bit lightly, because there's no real obvious threat of the system hitting Karratha, right, the centre of circulation. But that's the problem. Because there's not a hell of a lot of evidence of the system hitting Karratha directly, people will then take it easy and not understand the whole wind field idea, right? Because the wind field extends a long way from the centre of the circulation. So a system that passes up here, where all these models have got it, out there, that's still going to affect Karratha. That's still going to get Karratha on the edge of the core, right? So even though the centre may not hit the coast here around until it gets to Onslow Exmouth, the edge of the core is going to nudge the coastline here around Point Sampson, Karratha, those areas. So really important that those folks in those areas don't just look at that track and go, oh, it's not hitting us, it's all good, because it's close enough. It's close enough to create some real issues. Let's have a look at some of the wind field modelling for this, and just before we do, let's have a quick look at some of the intensity modelling for this. All right, so just to give you an idea of intensity modelling in the AI sense is a little bit too inflated. So what AI will do is overinflate the intensity a little bit. So in AI, we're seeing an average of Category 3 with quite a number of models pushing this up to Category 4 intensity on the Australian scale. As I say, AI does tend to inflate those numbers a little bit. And that's one of the criticisms with the AI modelling the way it is at the moment. But what it does show is a generally favourable environment for intensification. So you'll notice there, what we're looking for here is the trend. So see how we start with green, we go to yellow, we go to orange, and we peak at that sort of orangey red. And that's Category 3-ish, Category 4 potential intensity. The reason why we're seeing an increase in intensity estimates is the system's moved a little further west than what was being planned today. So it was being planned to move west and then west-southwest, down like this. So it's probably moving more around the central part of that forecast. So what that means is it's a little further away from land. It's able to wrap up a little bit tighter, a little bit stronger than it was going to be if it was too close to land the whole way. So it's going to find some open water here on approach to the west-southwest, and that's what increases the intensity estimates. And even with the Euro ensemble, which is probably the other way, so the AI ensemble gets a little bit carried away, the Euro ensemble is a little bit too defensive or conservative when it comes to intensity estimates, and even it's starting to push into that Category 2 average range. All right, so when the Euro is saying Category 2 and the experimental stuff is saying Category 4, we're probably looking at something around a 3 at its peak intensity, right? That's what it looks to be as it gets through here. And once again, the key here is not just following the centre, it's understanding that even if the centre doesn't hit Barrow Island still gets centre winds. Even if the centre doesn't hit Dampier or Karratha, Dampier at least has a really good chance at seeing core winds. Karratha, just a little bit further south, may not be quite as positive for them to see those major winds. But understanding that the wind field extends a long way from the centre. Let's have a look at the wind field modelling now so that you'll get a better picture of what I'm talking about in the wind field modelling. Bear with me while I get Dampier up again. I'm sure I had Dampier up. I don't know where it gone. Don't know where it went. All right. And we'll use the Euro. The Euro is the best numerical weather prediction model we have for tropical cyclones. And it's the one, that and the HAFS model, once the HAFS model cottons on and is pretty smart about the thing, is going to be our best guess at what the wind field modelling will be. All right. So, by the way, today, these little storms around Headland, between Headland and Karratha, have the potential to be very strong, very gusty. I'm not sure if Headland's recorded anything there from the edge of that storm, but you can see that there is a storm going through Headland right now, or just west of Headland right now. That, I'm sure, is going to be quite gusty as it pushes through. And any of these storms tonight through this area are going to be quite gusty between Headland and Karratha. So that's something that, you know, sometimes we don't think about, the fact that there is going to be a little bit happening before the system gets there. All right, so let's have a look here at our wind field modelling. We're looking at wind gusts here because sustained wind speeds may be slightly underestimated. So wind gusts, and I'll just give me a sec. I'll just bring this down so you can see what I'm talking about. Yep, righto. All right, so wind gusts around that western side of the circulation. So this is why the JTWC has called it a cyclone, but the Bureau of Meteorology has not. You can see there we're getting gusty winds up around 45 to 50 knots on that western side. As we continue, we can see that the system continues to slowly develop overnight. So here's where, around about 2 to 5 a.m. WA time, we may have enough evidence of the system becoming a tropical cyclone. You can see 35 knot winds there, 35 knot winds there, 35 knot winds there. We're pretty much very, very close to meeting tropical cyclone thresholds by about 2 a.m. And then as we go to 5 a.m., yep, we've done it. All right, so you can see there the system develops into a tropical cyclone by Bureau of Meteorology standards by 5 a.m. All right, so at this point, we're seeing significant winds offshore and around Cape Caraudran, De Grey, those sort of areas. We're seeing winds gusting to about 35 to 40. For Port Hedland, at this stage, winds at 5 a.m. in the morning, pretty gusty from the southeast, but they're coming over land. All right, so they're coming over land, so that means that you won't feel as gusty as it probably should unless you've got a little spot there that's a little bit more open. And open and susceptible to that southeasterly. Now, as the cyclone pushes to the west, to the north of Port Hedland, that's when our wind field opens up and becomes a bit more easterly to northeasterly. So this now allows for the winds to come directly into Hedland. So at this point, we're going to start to see Hedland copping some pretty strong winds, getting up to around that 40 to 50 knot range. So getting close to Category 1 intensity winds there around Port Hedland. You can see then we open it up further. As the cyclone pushes past them, you'll see that that wind field extends a long way. So those purple winds, which are 60 knot plus winds, those extend a fair way out from the centre of circulation. All right, so very important once again that we're not just focused on the middle of the middle and we're watching how large this wind field is, because otherwise we're going to underestimate the system just because the centre's not hitting us. So as we go through Port Hedland, peak period of winds there around mid to late morning into very, very early afternoon. That's our peak winds, especially once the winds turn east to northeasterly and we're no longer shielded by any land mass. This is also the time where we see our peak wave heights over Port Hedland as well, once we bring those onshore winds into the coastline. Right, as we continue, we see that push westwards. Now for Karratha, and you can see for Hedland, by the way, into the afternoon and evening, we're settling down. All right, our winds are dropping back to about, gusting to about 20 to 30s, but there could still be some little bit of heavy rain on the eastern side of the circulation and maybe some powerful little thunderstorms on the eastern side coming in off the water into Hedland after the cyclone's pushed west. Now, here's a great example of what I'm talking about here for Karratha, and we're going to zoom into Karratha so you can have a look at this. So we've got Point Sampson up here, we've got Wickham here, we've got Dampier, and we've got Karratha, right? So the idea here is that the cyclone in this situation, now this isn't guaranteed, but in this situation, our cyclone is a long way from Karratha. So it's around about, what is it, 80 kilometres, 90 kilometres even, away from Karratha. All right, so that's a fair way away. So it's missing Karratha by a fair way. And if all you're doing is plotting centre points on a map, you're looking at that and you're going, nothing to see here. But there is something to see here, because you can see Dampier is getting 50 to 60 knot winds. Karratha, 40 to 50 knot winds. Wickham, 50 to 60 knot winds. Here, around Point Sampson, 60 plus knot winds coming directly off the water too. Nothing to protect them once the winds come off the water. Same thing for Karratha. Nothing to protect Karratha once the winds start turning east to northeasterly. So just like for Port Hedland, some of your strongest winds in Karratha are going to come after the cyclone has pushed to the north and started to move northwest of you. Why? Because that opens up your wind field from the water. And what we see here, the biggest waves and the biggest winds for the Dampier-Karratha region come after the cyclone, after you think the threat's gone, right? After you look at it and go, oh, it's missed us, it's missed us. Suddenly, bang, northeasterly winds will come in and smack you from directly from the ocean. All right, and the same thing applies here around Point Sampson. 60, 65 knot gusts. Dampier, potentially 45, 55 knot gusts. Karratha, 50 knot gusts. And then potentially even a little bit more than that as the cyclone pushes further to the west. So see how it's pushing further to the west, but over Dampier and Karratha, we're actually getting some of our strongest winds well after the cyclone has pushed past us. All right, so there's our cyclone now, pushing past us. We think it's all over, but no, this is when we're getting our strongest winds, because they're coming directly off the ocean, no shielding effect, and we're getting the potential for large waves to come onto the coast now. Previous to that, the large waves weren't coming onto the coast, all right? After the cyclone pushes past us, those big waves are coming onto the coast. All right, so that's something to be very, very mindful of. Point Sampson, you're in a difficult spot there because you're getting fairly strong southeasterlies because those are coming over water. They're getting a little bit of a fetch up. So you're still going to get some pretty strong southeasterlies, whereas Karratha probably won't. And then you're going to see strong east to northeasterlies on the backside as well. And once again, from Point Sampson, this thing never gets within about 90 or 100 Ks from them. And they're still looking at potentially low-end Category 2 winds, high-end Category 1 winds. All right, so really important that we don't just assume, okay, it's moving to our north, we're nothing to see here, we're not going to cop anything. All right, otherwise we're going to get a rude shock. All right, as we go through, the cyclone then continues to track west, and you can see things start easing for Karratha from Sunday morning. Still a bit of rain to come on that eastern side with a few showers, maybe one of those gusty storms, maybe even a little water spout that comes onto the coast with one of those showers or storms on the backside of the cyclone. That tends to be a bit of a feature of these things. All right, we move further westwards now, and we head over to Exmouth Onslow. So as we know, there's been a trend westwards with the model guidance in the last 12 hours or so, and here's where things get a little bit hectic for them, and it gets a little bit tricky for them too. By the way, Barrow Island, you're getting your worst effects at this stage on about Saturday night into Sunday morning. So that period, Saturday night, Sunday morning, that's Barrow Island's worst period. Moving to about lunchtime, things are starting to settle down on Sunday. For Onslow, very similar to all the other Pilbara coastal areas. You're not going to see much on the front side where the winds are southeasterly again, all right? Then, as the core gets to you and the winds turn a bit more east-southeasterly, you're less shielded. And then especially when the winds turn northerly to northeasterly, that's when you're not shielded at all. And that's when you're going to see your strongest winds, and they're happening through Sunday. You'll notice there that the system then pushes down into the Gulf area here. And when that happens, we have a certain bit of funneling of that wind potential as well. So that creates an unknown there with regards to how the wind field's going to go. But you can certainly see for places like Exmouth, they're not shielded from a southeasterly. So they can see a southeasterly that's just as strong as any other type of directional wind. The only one that they're semi-shielded from is a westerly, but even that, there's a few little hills and cliffs and things there that will allow some downslope acceleration through Exmouth. So they're not really shielded from any direction at Exmouth. So they're probably, in this scenario, getting quite a bit of wind on the front side and also significant wind on the back side. The one positive here is that the cyclone probably maxes in intensity around Barrow Island. That's about as strong as it's going to be. and it may start a slow weakening trend after Barrow Island. And that's probably one of the saving graces there for Exmouth. As the system pushes towards them, it may begin weakening back from potentially a 3 to a 2, or from a 4 to a 3, or from a 2 to a 1. But it'll start weakening as it gets to the Northwest Cape. And then, of course, the difficult process is going to be, does it come over land or does it stay out to sea? Does it maybe miss the coast altogether and then come in like that? If that happens, then we're starting to talk about impacts for places like Carnarvon, tropical cyclone potential impacts for Carnarvon, where they may see Category 1 winds developing through there, maybe even marginal Category 2 winds developing through there, depending on the intensity of the system. The tighter the system stays to the coastline, the more likely it is to hold on to some intensity. If it goes too far out to sea and then curves back in, we would see it lose a lot of intensity on the charge in. Okay, but very, very clearly there, the difficulty that we're going to face is going to be the exact crossing point, because the exact crossing point is difficult due to the way the cyclone is moving, because the cyclone is moving almost parallel to the coastline here. All right, so that's what is making life very difficult for picking up a coastal crossing. Precipitation estimates at this stage, the cyclone's moving, and it's not going to stop it moving. It's going to be moving at 15, 20 k's an hour, basically its whole life cycle here. So because of that, our rainfall estimates aren't as high as they would probably have been with a slower moving system, and probably what we're used to in WA. Used to usually seeing 200 to 400 millimetres out of a tropical cyclone in WA. Not many times we see more than that. Not a hell of a lot of times we see less than that. But in this particular setup, you can see that we're sort of struggling to get more than about 100, 150 mils, maybe 200 if we're very lucky and we get right into the core. But overall, the rainfall estimate here isn't huge in any one particular location. But what I like about this rainfall is that it's being spread out over a very large area of WA. So when we take a more statewide view at the rainfall prospects, you can see that there's a very large area of the Pilbara with 50 to 150, very large area of the Gascoyne with 50 to 150, and a reasonable area of the Central West and even the agricultural regions. Hell, even the goldfields are getting into some of this. All right, so this is a fairly large rain event for a large section of WA here. So this is positive news for them. It's just that the highest level of intensity of rainfall probably isn't what we would normally anticipate with a tropical cyclone. Those sort of numbers maxing out at 1 to 200 mils is probably on the lower end of what we expect from a cyclone, but it makes sense because the cyclone's moving fairly quickly to the west, to the south, and then to the southeast. All right, folks, so that's what I've got for you there with regards to the upcoming tropical cyclone. I have no idea what its name's going to be either. I haven't even looked at that, so no idea. So if you know its name, let me know in the comments. All right, so I'll go through and have a look at if I've got any questions. So I'll prioritise any WA questions first, and then if there's no WA questions, I'll see if the Queenslanders have got anything. Jackie Pracey, another bloody Alfred. Oh, I think that's regarding the Coral Sea. No, I don't think so. Jackie, I think with that one, no, I'm not seeing Alfred vibes from it. Matt, why does a developed low tropical cyclone swing straight down to the graveyard? Matt, we might talk about that next week, mate, when we've got a... I want to prioritise the WA stuff for tonight, not talking about the Coral Sea stuff as much. So if you're interested in that, an answer to that question, come back to me early next week after this cyclone's hit WA, and we can discuss it then, mate. Will Geelong get rain? Victoria. Dave, I genuinely don't know. What from this thing? I would think not. No, I wouldn't think so. I would think this whole thing would have petered out well before it gets to Victoria. I'm not seeing evidence of any... I mean, Victoria might get rain from something else, but not from the cyclone. The cyclone should be done and dusted, I'd imagine. Let's have a look. I mean, there's another trough coming through Victoria, so that's where you might get some rain, but you won't get rain from this cyclone. No, mate. No, nothing there. Look out, I might be getting some rain Magnet way. Is that Mount Magnet? Kalen? Kalen, I think you're meaning Mount Magnet. Yeah, there could be some decent rain there. Let's have a look. Mount Magnet is in here somewhere, isn't it? Yeah, around Meekatharra. Yep. Yeah, so at this stage, mate, you're looking pretty healthy for some rain. It's just that, once again, don't go in expecting too much. Don't go in expecting what we normally see in a cyclone because it's moving so quickly. For Mount Magnet, and look for any place in WA here associated with the cyclone's crossing, and then its track further inland. We're probably not going to see the level of rainfall that we would normally have seen or have expected to see. So you can see Mount Magnet there's probably on the eastern side of a lot of the heavier rainfall based on the current model projections. If the JTWC forecast comes off, I think, mate, you could be looking at a lot of rain around Mount Magnet Way and even Meekatharra. But at this point, probably just west of you is where I'd be tipping the bulk of the rain to fall. But it is a pretty tricky affair because of that southwest, southeast motion. That timing of where the place of impact, the timing of the curve, all those things play a factor. So definitely keep an eye on it in Mount Magnet, but maybe don't go in expecting bulk rain over Mount Magnet. That might happen a bit further west of you. Hey Nitso, not so loud tonight. All good. All is good in Pentland. Good stuff, Zab. Can't wait to get some rain in Gero. Yeah, Gero's a tight one too. See, Gero's another one of these ones where... Yeah, so Gero's, just like we talked about with Mount Magnet, Gero's probably just west of the heavy rain. So Mount Magnet's just east of the heavy rain, Gero's just west, and the sort of rain will basically sort of go through the gap there, just inland of the coastline. So all those areas from Carnarvon southwards, they're probably just west of the really heavy rain at the way this is panning out at the moment. But listen, only a slight change to the west can change all that. But for now, I would say Gero will still see some rain, but maybe don't go in expecting too much for Gero itself, because at this point in time, the model evidence that we've got tells us that the cyclone's probably going to be moving east of them as it pushes through. And here's a great example, actually, as the cyclone... hang on, no, I've fast-forwarded too far. All right, so here's a great example. The cyclone comes down. So you'll notice there's a bit of rainfall activity on the south side because there's a fair bit of wind shear the cyclone's going to encounter once it's crossed the coast, and that's going to drive a fair bit of rain to the south of it. And that's happening on Monday night into Tuesday. And you can see there Gero just on the western edge. So you can see places further northeast like Northampton and sort of areas eastwards of Gero. Yeah, absolutely. There's better chances of good rain for them. But Gero's just on the edge there, and they only sort of see 6 to maybe 9 hours of good rain and maybe the chance of a storm before the rain hits, right? So that's Gero's chances of rainfall at the moment, the way this is going. Hey Nitso, the Facebook weather guys don't know the difference between a cyclone and an east coast low. Can you explain? Probably not without diagrammatical diagrams, mate. So that might be a question I'd have to prepare for, to show some diagrams and stuff. Yeah, it's a little bit technical to explain that without some diagrams. I like to show diagrams for that, and I don't have any on hand, mate. So that's something I probably can't explain to you right now. Matt, why would a cyclone lose intensity by going out over water and on the way in? Wouldn't that give it more fuel? Matt, what are we talking about there, mate? Why would a cyclone lose intensity by going out over water and on the way in? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I meant, mate. So the fact that the cyclone is out over water, so this WA cyclone, because it's finding more open water, it's finding more fuel, more energy availability, more moisture for that latent heat release. So all of that is going to help fuel the cyclone. So it will become stronger because it's moved out to sea, right? So yeah, absolutely. So what you're saying makes sense, and if I haven't explained it that way, I've explained it completely incorrectly. But what you're saying makes total sense, and that's exactly what I'm expecting, is the cyclone to be a bit stronger because it is a bit further out to sea, mate. So why would it lose intensity over water? Well, because of other factors. So as we move west of, say, Barrow Island, we're going to start to see an increase in vertical wind shear. And that increase in vertical wind shear is certainly going to hamper the cyclone from A, further intensification, probably B, weakening it, even though it's over water. But that's why if it comes into the coast this far to the west, sure, it will potentially be weakening as it does so. But maybe not weakening quickly, just slowly weakening. Yeah, Tom, good stuff. You just had a storm in Headland. Yeah, we could just see the edge of it, mate. I just saw the edge of it there on our radar. And we go to Port Hedland and have another look. Yeah, we definitely had something going on there on the radar. Yeah, there it is there. How close did you get to it? Oh, you just got the edge of it. Yeah, just the edge of it. Yeah, just the edge of it over the western edge of Headland. Got the eastern edge of the storm. By the looks of that, does velocity have anything for us? Yeah, some pretty solid winds. Yeah, that's as I say. The storms at the moment, these storms on the periphery, they're the strongest part of this cyclone right now. So they've got stronger winds than the cyclone does. So yeah, you're probably lucky you just dodged a bullet there. That looks very, very menacing on the radar. Looks as though we got a bit of velocity folding. We're looking a fair way up in the atmosphere though, because I don't think Port Hedland has a velocity radar. But from the Dampier radar. Yeah, there's a fair bit of velocity folding there, so that tells us that this thing was packing some serious wind between Headland and Karratha when it went through. Mitchell's the next name. Thanks, Carl. Yeah, thanks, mate. I had no idea who was the next name. Thanks, Halen. Mitchell. Thanks, Nitso. Missed the beginning. We'll replay later. Yeah, Fee, you're from Queensland, so just check the first 5 minutes out, mate. We talked about the stuff in the Coral Sea, this garbage in the Coral Sea. It's garbage right now, but if it turns into something a bit less garbagey, it'll duck out to the graveyard. And if it stays garbage, it might be very interesting down the line. So keep an eye on that. There is some potential for that down the line. Do I need to worry about my insurance lapse in Karratha? I would think not. Karratha's pretty well built, man. Karratha's a really well built town or city. Is it a city? Might be a city. Anyway, it's a really well built place and great building standards there. I wouldn't be too concerned about a Category 1 because we're looking at Category 1 winds over Karratha, maybe marginal 120, 125, maybe even 130 if the cyclone gets close around Karratha. There shouldn't be too much destruction. I think the biggest thing you've got to look out for is trees. Just don't park your car under or near a tree and make sure you don't have anything under or near a tree that might fall. That's pretty much the one thing you've got to look out for in Karratha. If this was hitting southeast Queensland, it'd be a different story, right? Because their structures and buildings probably certainly aren't as well coded as the stuff that around Cyclone Alley, and that's where you guys are in Karratha, your Cyclone Alley. All right, so everything here is built to absolute maximum Australian standards. Southeast Queensland, no, there'd be some shacks there that wouldn't handle a Category 1, and there'd be some shacks down in southern WA that wouldn't handle a Category 1 either. But for you guys in Karratha, yeah, your structures should be well and truly capable of supporting this sort of thing. So I can't imagine any real structural damage in Karratha unless the cyclone comes directly at you or unless it intensifies sharply and comes directly at you. I can't imagine that. And we're not expecting that. The sharp intensification we might, but maybe not the coming at you thing. Hey, mate, am I going to be able to work Sunday onwards, Townsville, the Cairns flooding on the Bruce? No, Rob, you'll be able to work, mate. Sunday. Yeah. There's not much going on for that area between Townsville and Cairns. Not getting much rain at all between Sunday onwards until late next week. Late next week there'll be some showers and thunderstorms into next weekend, and then after that, anyone's guess, mate. Anyone's guess. You were saying if it swings out off the coast more, it will lose intensity on the way in versus if it hugs the coast. No. If I did say that, I've said something completely incorrect, mate. Sorry, Matt. If it goes out to sea, it will get stronger because it doesn't have land interaction. But then the further west and south it travels, after about Barrow Island, the more likely it is to come under wind shear, and that will weaken the system as it comes into land. But it won't weaken it quickly because it's moving in the same direction as the shear. We talk about all this stuff, by the way, in our subscription service, folks. So if you're interested in the dynamics there, check out our subscription service, weatheriq.com.au/subscribe, $32.95 a year. And we go through the technical aspects of that. And that, I remember that was something I just did because I only finished it just before coming on here and talking to you guys, was talking about the fact that the system is moving with the shear, but eventually the shear will take control and start to take bits and pieces and rip them off the cyclone itself and drop a lot of the rainfall to the south of the circulation. Anyway, we talked about all those technicalities in the subscription service. So, Matt, if you're asking questions like that, I reckon you'd like the subscription service. And Karratha is a city, yes. Good stuff, Tanya. Yeah, I thought it might have been a city. I always make that mistake. Sometimes I call something a city and it's a town, and then I get 1,000 people correcting me. I just want to have a quick look here to see if we've got any super chats on our YouTube stream. And no, we do not. All right, folks, that's where I'm going to leave you tonight. Now, because we've got a cyclone impacting the coastline, and because we're going to see some really strong winds tomorrow night and into Sunday morning, I will have another live update tomorrow night. So we're going to track this live with you, and we're going to give you some live updates tomorrow night to see how we're going. Once again, I'd like to keep the discussion mostly on topic to WA, not getting sidetracked too much with peripheral stuff like Queensland and Coral Sea garbage. All right, so for tomorrow night, really want to hone in on WA, particularly the Dampier-Karratha area and Ground Zero, which is likely to be somewhere between Onslow and Exmouth. All right, they're the areas I want to discuss tomorrow night. Have a good night. Thanks for joining me.